Hi there and welcome to tutorial 48. Today we're going to be looking at modulation aspects of synthesizers, and in particular the Sledge, of course, the Studiologic Sledge. But in the 1960s, when Moog and ARP were making small versions or mini versions of their synths, like the Mini Moog or the ARP Odyssey, the first thing that went was the patch cables, which were replaced by switches and knobs or sliders to recreate the modulation possibilities. If we fast forward to the present day, the Arturia Matrix Brute obviously does it without patch cables, but it's got this matrix that you can see here, 16 by 16, with modulation sources and destinations. When we look at the Sledge, we've got this little section here called modulation. We've actually got a kind of a matrix, modulation matrix, by having 6 different shapes here, which are the sources, and then the modulation destinations are on here. Now, we have actually got 3 LFOs. The one that says wheel is controlled by the wheel and aftertouch at the same time, so you can get a number of different possibilities there, and as well as regular cyclical waveforms here, sawtooth, square, triangle, sine, sample and hold, which is like a random one. We've also got a ramp facility, and I'll be explaining that a little bit later. So the question is, can we achieve with this sort of modest modulation section some of the sounds that might be reminiscent of the old modular synths, or indeed the Arturia Matrix Brute? So I've prepared 4 sounds really here. The first 2 are sound effects, so I'll just show you what those are. This is a bit like the sound when you put a needle onto a record. That crackles. And the next one is thunder. And the next one, 667, is various different pitches coming together. With vibrato. And the final one is this one, which again uses the mod wheel and aftertouch. And I'll show you how I created those sounds. So the first one that we're going to look at is the crackles one, and we're going to use an initial setting, and on here I've just limited that to 1 oscillator, oscillator number 1. But in actual fact, the crackle sound, we're not going to be using an oscillator, we're going to be using the noise setting. So we've got an option of pink or white noise here. We're going to use white noise and just adjust the level of that to 100. Now the whole sound really comes from the filter being modulated, so I'm going to set up LFO1 on sample and hold, which is the random type effect. That's going to control the cutoff of the filter, and the speed of that is 111, which is pretty fast, and the depth is plus 44, because we've got plus and minus depth controls here, so plus 44. And if we now hear the sound, we're just pretty much hearing white noise because the filter is open. The things that we need to to control on the filter, we need to make, we're going to choose a velocity of 89, so it gives us a bit of control over the keyboard velocity. 89, there we are. But the filter, we're going to use not low pass, not high pass, not band pass, but high pass filter. And it's on a 24 dB slope. The key track is set to normal, which is 64, right in the middle there, and 0 resonance. So in the high pass filter, when I scroll down from this setting to a bit lower, you can hear the effect of it. It's almost like kind of tuning in a radio. But the setting that we're after is 95. 86, 89, 90, 95, there we are. And that's our crackle sound. So moving on to the thunder sound. Again, we'll reinstate the initial setting. And we've got one oscillator up for that. And here we are going to use the oscillator number 1, and we'll leave it on this setting, which is the pulse wave setting. And when the pulse wave value is 50, it's a square wave. Sounds like that. Doesn't sound very much like thunder at the moment, and we're not even going to be using any noise. All of that sort of random effect comes from an LFO modulating oscillator 1. So we've got LFO 1 on a sawtooth waveform, so a jaggedy one there, and that's going to modulate oscillator 1. The speed of the LFO is 127, so that's absolute maximum. And the depth this time we're going to use a negative value of minus 43. You can hear what happens when we do that. It goes from a regular sound to a decimated sound. Now we need the effect of the sort of explosive quality of that. And over to the filter section, where we're going to use the filter envelope. Filter envelope amount 63 all the way up. The attack time is 0. The decay is 86. Sustain 0. Release 89. And to go along with that, the amplifier envelope, velocity 0, attack 0, sustain 127, and release 92. Now at the moment the filter is fully open on a low pass 24 dB setting. We're going to use a 12 dB slope, and the cutoff is going to be 39. There we are. Need a little bit of resonance in there, up to 21. And key track 64, dead in the middle, no drive. That's pretty much our sound there. But we're going to, and we can pretty much play any note on the keyboard for that. We're going to put a bit of reverb in there as well. And the reverb time is 100. And the level 32. And that's our thunder sound. Right, so the next couple of sounds, we set up an initial setting, are slightly more complicated because we're going to use all three oscillators for this. Now the first one with the variations of pitch, I'll set up the oscillators first and then I'll set up the modulation section. So we need all three oscillators on a sawtooth waveform. We want oscillator 1 on a 32-foot pitch. Let's click in the other ones. These are going to be on a 16-foot pitch. And to create a little bit of chorusy effect, we're going to just detune this one. Let's detune this one a bit as well. And it's just up to you how much you detune it, but that one is -8 and that one's, sorry, -8 and this one's +6. And that's our 3 oscillators there. We might as well do the filter section now as well. So low pass 24 dB filter, cutoff, quite extreme, 42. But of course, the amount that we're going to use, the filter envelope amount, is 56. So that brings up the filter a little bit according to the things we've got on here. So to set that up, we've got attack 93. The values, that's what I was looking for. Attack 93. There we are. Decay 84. Sustain 43. And release 94. So we'll also set up the amplifier envelope and velocity is 0. Attack time 53, so a bit of a fade in. Decay, well actually, sustain 127, which negates any decay value there, and release 87. Now this is a pretty nice sound in its own right. We're also going to add a little bit of chorus in there, and it's the default chorus setting of rate 20, depth 50, and we'll put a bit of reverb in there as well. So the reverb time is 100 and the level is 67. So a nice fat sort of sound going on there. But where this particular patch comes into its own is where the pitches of each oscillator kind of coincide with each other. And the way to do that is we're going to use a ramp facility on LFO1, and we're going to apply that to oscillator 3. Now just by toggling those along, we can get oscillator 3 on its own. And we need speed 46. There we are, and the depth is crucial, 36. That's plus 36 in this case. And we'll hear the effect of just oscillator 1. Sometimes it doesn't play a ball. Let's just actually go onto the setting itself and oscillator 1. There we are, it's descending in pitch. Now what we need to do with that is create a semitone difference of +2 semitones. So now LFO2 is going to affect oscillators 1 and 2. There we are. And that's also on a ramp setting. So we'll click in oscillators 1 and 2. Ah, I know why it didn't. Yeah, because we had oscillator LFO1 controlling, LFO1 was controlling oscillator 3. That's why we didn't hear anything initially. But now we're going to LFO2, and we'll set up the ramp setting speed 40. And this time the depth is going to be -28. We also need to have a little bias on there of +2 semitones, and on the third oscillator, which is the rising one, which we should have had in the first place, needs to be -1. Now the two things that determine the final resting point, pitch in other words, of the oscillators, and that is the semitone variation on each of the oscillators plus the depth control. So you need to fiddle about with those a little bit to get the effect that you want. But this is the final effect that we're going for here. Of all those pitches colliding. Let's put a little bit of vibrato on that with the wheel. So we need the wheel on a sine wave, and the destination is going to be all three oscillators. The speed is 48 and the depth is 19. Now there's two ways that we can introduce vibrato, and that's either on the mod wheel or by pressure. So that's given us vibrato. What if we wanted a slightly different effect? Let's put it on a little random sample and hold thing. And now here I'm going to alter the depth manually. And there's the speed. So we can have a mess about with the whole thing once that's in situ by introducing different modulation effects. Okay, so the final sound that we've got, let's just check that we've got that one. It's got that sort of filter modulation, and we'll go to an initial setting for that. And again, we're going to use all three oscillators. So the first oscillator is 32 foot pitch square wave, and we're going to use some pulse width modulation on oscillators 2 and 3. These are at 16 foot pitch. So if we hear that composite sound, we've got that. We're going to actually put all of these values here to about 90, just to balance up the sound. So it's a bit quieter than normal, because we're going to introduce some noise in a second. But again, let's mess about with the filter. So the low pass filter, 24 dB slope, cutoff 53. Fairly steep cutoff, but of course we're going to introduce some filter amounts here of plus 63. And we need to set up the filter envelope. So attack 0, decay 83, sustain 0, release 89. And let's put in the amplifier envelope as well. Attack 0, sustain 127, release 89. Now, one of the things, oh yes, a little bit of reverb as well. So reverb time 97 and at level 50. So one of the things to create that that nice sort of swirly effect is to either use chorus, or in this case we're going to use pulse width modulation. So I've set up pulse width modulation to be on LFO2. It doesn't really matter, but this is what's been previously set up. So a sine wave shape and pulse width modulation there. The speed is 34 and the depth is 43. And we can alter the actual pulse width itself here, and one is going to be 30 and one is going to be 70, and a little bit of detune in there, plus 11, minus 11. That gives us the richness of sound. And then we're going to use LFO1, and on LFO1 we've got a sawtooth waveform to affect the cutoff frequency of the filter, speed 58 and the depth is -41. Now you should be able to hear that doing the up, 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 up. Let's just open the filter up a little bit so you can hear that happening a little bit as well. So to finish off the filter, we need a resonance of 77. That's better. That's it. And we also need to put some white noise in there. So the options are pink or white. We choose white noise at a level of 96. Okay, and finally we're going to set up the wheel to control the cutoff frequency of the filter, so we've got a little bit of control over that. So the way to do that is to set the ramp setting. There we are. And to control the cutoff frequency, and there it is there. So speed all the way up to 127 and the depth +55. +55. And there's two ways that obviously we'll be able to hear that. And one of the ways is by the modulation wheel. And the other is by pressing on the keyboard. Or a combination. And we'll put some glide in there as well.